So let's see, hang on a second. One other thing, one other little thing. Oh, that's better. Okay. Yes, that's better. Okay. So now the technical things are more or less set up. And after a week of feeling more like a sea cucumber than a human, I finally have a little bit of energy. Of course, cucumbers may have more energy than I would think of them. Maybe a sea slug, I don't know. Um, so I am mostly better. A little bit more to rest and recover. And I'll have a cough for a few days. But if I cough in the middle of this, you shouldn't worry because I'm definitely on the way up. This is a point of an illness like this where you sound worse than you feel. So, anyways, I'd like to take this opportunity to begin by thanking you all for hanging in there, despite the fact that I have not been able to do much for the last 7, 8 days. So we'll begin, and my plan today is that we'll have a shortish teaching, and then we'll do a little bit of White Tara for Rinpoche, and then I'll do whatever we need to do, and then close with the dedication prayers. So that's my plan for today. So let's just, without further ado, we will begin with the short Vajra prayer. And I'd like to ask everyone to please supplicate this with faith and devotion in the lineage gurus. In particular, we can think of Trungpa Rinpoche. So as you do this, you kind of visualize in front of yourself, visualize Vajradhara, Low Vajradhara, Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Gampopa. And the first Karmapa, Dusun Khenpo, who's kind of visualize him as like an old man and not a very beautiful one, not an attractive one. He apparently was actually said to look a little bit like an ape. So you visualize Dusun Khenpo and think that Dusun Khenpo and Trungpa Rinpoche are the same in essence as you recite this prayer with faith and devotion. On doje chanje delo narodam marba mila cheje gambo Dusum sheja kunshin karma pa che shi chum je je bar nam tam je ta ca sun pa ba so sablam chaya chela nganye ben nyame droga ndalo kajula so ade so gaj lama je ba no nam thar je lo shen lo gong je gang ba so Bashin Seno Gena Batam Sendid Tha Chebe Gon Shem Yegor Shamba Bashin Mengade Gojinde Ramalam Junda Sova Debe Gonchema Jeme Moge Jivo Yeng Me Gonje Moje So Bashin Kanjarto Be so mate maje dengar jo be gom chena gom sha ta Angelo Nando Chego Son Bashin Jian Bangaro Gom Chen Kode Angelo Tam Dharme Shiji Pa Jin Satalamji Yenden Radzonem Dorje Change Gongha Nyor Tojo Dorje Change Gongha Nyor Tojo Chazawadan Chijin Shabadam Jesu Irangujin Soai Gewa jungze dagi ji saba tamje dagi chanju chirho zaji peju ju shi me do chang Rira liji ni de jamba de sangye shingdo me de puwa yi ragu namda shinla jeba jo senje namge samba tam Loye chera jidawar chechun tumo tebayi chigi kolo kordozo. The Dharma expanse palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas. Of the three times who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And now think to yourselves that we must free all of our mothers, all sentient beings throughout space, with whom we've had an infinite number of connections, an infinite number of lifetimes. Think that we must free them all from this ocean of suffering and samsara and bring them to the lasting happiness of Buddhahood. And for that reason, we are listening, contemplating, and meditating upon the Dharma. So today we are engaging in listening, and so please listen with the motivation of bodhicitta. And the Dharma that we are listening to is the Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva. Of the 10 chapters of the Way of the Bodhisattva, we have been discussing the 9th chapter, the chapter on transcendent prajna. Now, in the chapter on transcendent prajna, there is a passage at the beginning talking about the benefits of bodhicitta. And then there is a passage speaking about the two truths. Then there are passages talking about the path, taking illusoriness, the illusory nature of all phenomena as the path, and taking the emptiness of all phenomena as the path. So we're still actually speaking about the taking illusory nature of all phenomena as the path. And within that, at the end, there's the discussion of the nature of all the Buddhas. And so we left off there on last Wednesday night. There are a couple more verses to go through on that passage, and then we'll come to the passage on taking emptiness as a path, which actually primarily consists of a discussion. The main part of that is a discussion of whether the Mahayana Dharma is a great vehicle, or Mahayana Dharma is actually Dharma, or whether it's made up later. And so then there are a couple more verses on that. And then following that session is the passage that actually begins talking about how we meditate on emptiness itself. I mean, we've talked about proving that emptiness is worth meditating on. Essentially, that's what we're talking about at the beginning of the chapter. Then he talks about how to meditate on emptiness, speaking first about meditating on the emptiness of the self, how there's no real individual self, and then second, about meditating on the emptiness of phenomena. So because of my ill health in the last week, we have not been able to get as far. I mean, I would have actually liked to be speaking about this topic that we're starting this morning, last Sunday morning, but it didn't happen. And so I think what I'd like to do is go through this topic today about primarily speaking about the proof that the Mahayana is the words of the Buddha. And then a couple of verses at the end about taking why it's reasonable to take emptiness as a path. And then we're going to have to schedule some time in the future, and we won't worry about that right now. We'll be in contact with the organizing committee to figure out when is a good time for everyone in Portland, when is a time that might fit in my schedule, and so forth, so that we can actually finish this. And I'd like to be able to finish this teaching, if possible, in this year, because I mean, there's always a general level of impermanence that we don't know how long any of us are going to be around. In particular, I don't know about myself. And I do know that if I am around, that the first 6 months of the next year of 2024 are likely to be busy. So I think it's probably good to try to wrap this up sooner rather than later if we can. Of course, we have to look at everyone's schedule. So, but we'll worry about that later, and I'll be in contact with the organizing committees about scheduling that time. It's disappointing that I haven't been able to do it right now, but this is just how circumstances go. This is how things happen, you know. This is the nature of life, is that you get sick and you die. So I got sick. I didn't die this time. I wasn't sick enough to die. I never thought I was sick enough to die, but I was sick. And so we don't know which is going to happen next, and everything's impermanent, and we always have to keep this in mind. So if you, like His Holiness has said on a number of occasions, if you want to do something virtuous, if there's something virtuous that you're intending to do, you have to do it today, because you don't know about tomorrow. So I don't know about, I really don't know about tomorrow. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? But we could be planning to do something later on this summer or fall or whenever. But will there be a later on this summer or fall? It's hard to tell. What else is going to come up? It's hard to know for any of us. So it would have been best to finish, but it's not happening. So when it's not happening, we might think, well, is it disappointing that it's, that, of course it's disappointing. I would have liked to have been able to finish these teachings on the way of the Bodhisattva this year. But or this visit, but it didn't happen. And we've had a lot of, His Holiness had a lot of obstacles in his teachings, which was disappointing. We have Rinpoche in the hospital, which is more than disappointing. It's quite concerning. And in such a situation as this, we might think, well, this is all these obstacles. I mean, for these teachings to be kind of delayed by me getting a little sick and just having a fever for 7 days isn't really a big deal. I mean, it wasn't even a severe fever. It was just like a mild fever that just kept me in bed for 7 days. So inconvenient more than anything else, right? And this teaching, in comparison to, Trungpa Rinpoche's activity, in comparison to, His Holiness's activity, which has been delayed, for quite a bit with these teachings that are finally going to come to a close tomorrow, and I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. Famous last words. At any rate. But one of the things that, is particularly in this last year with so many delays and changes of plans and canceled plane tickets and changed plane tickets and blah, 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 in the last few, it's like, you just roll with it. You got to go with it. It reminds me of, and this is actually a far more serious thing. In 2010, Trungpa Monastery in Tibet was destroyed by an earthquake, as many of you know. It had been destroyed in 1959 in the Cultural Revolution, and starting in the 1980s and especially in the 90s, Rinpoche went to a lot of effort to help rebuild it. I mean, he didn't spend his time actually there, but he put a lot of effort into, a lot of thought into it, and it was flourishing. And then there was an earthquake, and among the 100,000 people killed in the earthquake were quite a number of monks from Trungpa Monastery, and some of them very good monks. And we heard about it in the morning, and Rinpoche heard about it, and he immediately started praying. Now, a few months later than that, I had the good fortune to translate for Rinpoche as he was asked about the earthquake. Excuse me. And when Rinpoche spoke about it, he said, of course, it was a shock to hear about it at first, but that he remembered the nature of impermanence in the teachings of the Buddha. The end of what is it? The end of meeting is parting. The end of building is falling down. The end of birth is death. And remembering this, remembering impermanence, just reflecting on this is just the actual nature of samsara. And so Rinpoche said that he was actually very calm. Even though inside he was very calm, on the outside he was completely focused on his prayers, reciting mantras, praying. And I do remember this from the time. I saw him a few times during that time. And of course, Rinpoche always has a mala with him and is always reciting prayers and mantras and things like that. Even when you're with him in kind of a casual setting, he often has his mala in his hand and is thinking about, reciting prayers. And so he especially, but it was especially intense in the few days after the earthquake. And so, on the outside, everything looked like it was going wrong. And on the inside, actually, Rinpoche was very focused on bringing benefit to all sentient beings. So I sort of felt in this last week, as I was in a situation that a lot of people would have felt miserable. I actually didn't feel miserable. First of all, everyone here in Portland, Maine, has been taking such excellent care of me that, there's no reason for me to be, and even more people were willing to take care of me, but I was just kind of so groggy that I didn't think to take advantage of all the opportunities that I had to be taken care of. So that's the one aspect, but the other aspect, of course, it's disappointing to miss the Dharma, the opportunity to continue to teach the Dharma, to try to help people and so forth. But this is our karma. This is a situation. It's the nature of samsara. It's an opportunity for us. To getting sick is a wonderful opportunity to remember the suffering of others. Take others' body, using your own body as an example, develop compassion for other sentient beings, the Buddha said. And so, you take the illness of your own body and you think, oh, I wish this is the suffering that I'm having, and this is even a minor illness, and think, well, let me, see if I can pray to take on the suffering of all other sentient beings. May I pray to be able to do this. I'm not going to claim that I actually am able to do any of this, but even thinking like this, following these instructions that we have, I certainly can't claim to be able to practice the instructions of taking illness as a path as found in the instructions of Khenpo Gangshar and so forth. I certainly am not able to do that, but at least to try to do the instructions on mind training that Rinpoche has given us and has given me. It's an incredible gift, an incredible thing. And so I don't feel like there's anything, of course it's disappointing, but I don't feel unhappy or upset. And I haven't really felt unhappy or upset during this last week. So there's nothing to be upset about, nothing to be depressed about. This is just how it goes. It is kind of interesting to me because at the same time as I started teaching the way of the Bodhisattva a couple chapters a year here in Portland, Maine, I'd also already started doing the same thing in Hong Kong, I think starting a year or two earlier. I think it was 2 years earlier. And in October of 2019, I went to Hong Kong and I gave my first 3 teachings, and I got to the same point in the text. And then, of course, there are all the political protests, and I haven't been able to go back to Hong Kong and finish the teachings yet. So it's like, what is it about this particular point in the text that it's like an obstacle for me teaching it? Maybe it's a sign that I shouldn't be teaching it. I don't know. But since I've started, I have to try to finish. Of course, I really don't have the qualities to, if you're going to teach a text, you really should understand it. If you want to actually teach the text, you want to teach the meaning of the text, right? And since I have not really realized emptiness, I just have somewhat of a conceptual understanding. Probably not even that deep a conceptual understanding. I just have some basic conceptual understanding. It's hard for me to actually teach the real nature of emptiness, but I've started, so I'll try to do my best when we can manage to reconvene. So in any case, I don't see any reason to be depressed or upset about how this teaching has gone, other than the fact that it would have been nice to see all of you more and to be able to share more Dharma with you in the past few days. So let's now get back to the text and what we were speaking about last time. We were speaking about the activities of the Buddha, talking about how the Buddha achieves the Dharmakaya and how the two form kayas arise from that, and how the Buddha then performs activity without any thought, without conception, without any language, without perceiving anything, not perceiving anything. And so the Buddha, in performing the activity, when the Buddha performs the activity of the Buddha, it's like there are analogies given for it. One of the analogies is that the Buddha is like the Buddha is like a cloud that rains. Cloud rains, and it rains equally over the whole earth, everything underneath it. It drops its rain. It makes the ground wet. In areas where there's fertile soil and there are seeds, and the seeds will grow, the grain will grow, the crops will grow, and it'll be produce an abundant crop. When it falls in an area where there's just sand, nothing will grow. But the Buddha rains the rain, so the cloud rains, showers its rain on all land equally. And the Buddha, in the same way, showers the rain of Dharma equally on all sentient beings. Some beings are ready for it, and some beings are not. So some beings are ready for it, and it's like the crop of the Dharma grows. The fruit of the Dharma, the seed of the Dharma is awakened within our beings and bears the fruit. And in some beings, it moistens the soil, maybe, hopefully in the future. Definitely in the future, it makes an effect. But the Buddha doesn't think, I'm going to rain on these beings and not those beings. The Buddha doesn't have any thought, I am raining on beings. Just like just as the storm cloud doesn't think when it lets down its rain, neither does the Buddha have any thought. Another analogy, this is everyone says this is a made-up analogy, and it's a very Indian analogy. You've got the god Indra in his palace in the realm of the 33. He's up there disporting, all the gods and goddesses are disporting and enjoying all the pleasures of the gods. And we on earth don't have any idea what it is. But then somehow magically the ground turns into Vajra crystal, which is it's probably beryl. And it's reflective. And so when you look in the beryl on the ground, then you see the reflection of the gods in the realm of the 33, in the heaven of the 33. And you can see the gods and goddesses up there enjoying themselves. And you think of yourself, and you're especially if you're like, from India and the ancient India, you're thinking, well, I have to break my back sowing all my fields and look at the gods up there. I'm going to practice virtue so that I'm going to be able to be reborn in the God realm. Now, the gods are not thinking, I'm going to make these people think that. The Vedurya, the crystal on the ground, is not thinking, I'm going to reflect that. It just happens. And people see it. And then they are inspired to practice virtue so that they're reborn there. And it's the same with the Buddha. The form kayas appear to us. They don't think. They don't have any thought. They appear to us. And because they appear to us, they inspire us. It's us who actually have to do the work. I mean, the blessing of the Buddha is kind of like, there is something there, but it's us who really have to do the work. So they inspire us. So like that reflection. A third example that also comes from, these are all from the sutras, and in particular, they're collected in the Mahayana Sublime Continuum. There are 9 examples. I'm only going to go through 3. The third example is of like the drum of Dharma in the realms of the gods. It's also in the heaven of the 33. And this is a drum that just plays automatically all the time, beating the drum. And when it beats the drum, it says, remember impermanence, remember to be careful, be mindful, careful, remember impermanence, remember the Dharma. It's the drum of Dharma that's continually playing in the 33. And it reminds the gods that they have to be careful, because the gods are, by nature, they're so distracted by pleasure that they're careless, right? And so it reminds them. Now the drum is just a drum. Drums have no thoughts, just automatically playing, automatically making sounds because of causes and conditions. It has no thought, and yet it inspires the gods to be careful. In the same way, the Buddha teaches the Dharma. The Dharma inspires us to be mindful, aware, and careful, and to practice the Dharma. But the Buddha has no thought about doing it, just like the drum. So these are the examples of how the Buddha performs activity without a mind. But then the problem here is like this idea that the Buddha has no mind. And in fact, this is an idea, it's in Shantideva, and we speak about it in the Kagyu school. We describe it as the Buddha has wisdom, but not mind. Wisdom being non-dual, non-conceptual, beyond our conception. In other schools, they might say that the Buddha has mind relatively, but not ultimate. When the Buddha views the relative, the Buddha has mind. When the Buddha is viewing the ultimate, the Buddha is using wisdom. So they kind of have this back and forth in other schools. That's also another way of looking at it. But in our Kagyu school, we speak about it as the Buddha does not have any mind. The reason is that mind, being dualistic, arises from ignorance. And the Buddha has entirely eliminated ignorance and all of its imprints. So there's no possible way that he could have mind, which is inherently dualistic. So the Buddha has no mind. Well, if the Buddha has no mind, then it says in the sutras that we need to make offerings to the Buddha. So if we make offerings to the Buddha and recite praises of the Buddha, how is that going to do any good? Because, I mean, if you're going to make an offering to something completely illusory, how is the merit that you get from that real? So this is the objection. How is it making offerings to one who has no mind bears fruit? There's no mind there. I mean, you're offering to the Buddha. You want to offer to the Buddha with all his wisdom and everything. He's got to have mind, right? This is what the realist Buddhist schools, that is the foundation vehicle schools, or to be specific, the Great Exposition and the Sutra schools, or probably also the present-day Theravada would have a similar position. The Buddha's essentially, the Buddha's a being who's got to have a mind, and if the Buddha doesn't have a mind, then there's no way we can gather merit by making offerings to them. And the Shantideva's reply is, this is taught to be the same whether they're present or in nirvana. So the Buddha taught during his own lifetime in sutras that everyone accepts, that when you make an offering to a live Buddha, or when you make an offering to a stupa that contains relics of the Buddha, it produces the same merit. It's the same merit. The merit is the same either way. So it's the same whether they're present, that is the live Buddha, or past nirvana as the relics inside of a stupa. It's exactly the same. The relics inside of the stupa, according to the foundation vehicle, don't have any mind. It's the same. So this way we see that the merit is actually the same. There are results according to scripture, whether they're relative or suchness, just as there would be a result from a true Buddha, for example. So the scriptures all say that there are the foundation vehicle and the Mahayana vehicle scriptures all say that when you make offerings to a Buddha, whether that Buddha is a relative illusion, whether that Buddha is a real existent entity, the making the offering brings a virtuous result. And this doesn't matter whether they're the relative illusion or the ultimate. And it's just as, and so just as in the foundation vehicle, people say you gain real merit from making an offering, a real offering to a real Buddha. In the middle way, we say you gain illusory merit from making an illusory offering to an illusory Buddha. In the end, you have the same result that you can come to achieve the illusory result of that Buddhahood. And so it doesn't matter that the Buddha is not real. You're still making an offering, still makes it, because you can feel it. I mean, if you just, let's go, I mean, if you're just real about it, if you make an offering to even just a tanka of the Buddha, such as we have, well, I'm pointing at the Shakyamuni Buddha over to my left, or of course there's the tanka behind me too. You make an offering to that, and you have faith and devotion in it, just as if it's the same as an actual Buddha. You gain merit. When Rinpoche taught in Calcutta in 2005, he brought me along as a translator, and I wasn't very good at that time. And in particular, at that point, I was really infected with pride, and I really did not do a good job of translating on that trip. But we went to the Calcutta Museum, where there was a vessel that was said to contain relics of the Buddha. And so Rinpoche, we went and they opened it up specially for us, and we went into this room that no one else had gone, was allowed, and there were a bunch of other things there. And we saw this thing, and of course, on the outside, it just looks like some sort of an ancient clay pot. But Rinpoche had just like total devotion, total faith. This is like his example. Praying, making the 7-branch offering, reciting prayers, wholeheartedly doing everything, because he had this understanding that doing this, whether or not it's like a Buddha who seems to be alive, or whether it looks to us like, an ancient clay pot, if you have that understanding that this is the Buddha, and you make that offering with that intensity. I mean, this is one of the examples that Rinpoche has shown me over the years. It's like, I have so many, it's like so many blessings just from watching what he does. The intensity with which he prayed is really, really powerful. And every time I've been with Rinpoche on pilgrimage, we went to Kushinagar. We stopped by the place where Chunda the blacksmith offered him the last meal. And then we drove a little ways. We got to the river where the Bhagavan Buddha took his last bath. Then we got to the stupas at Kushinagar. And then there's the Kushinagar, and there's a really beautiful statue, a reclining statue of the Buddha. Really, one of the most lovely statues. There are two really, in my opinion, there are two really outstanding statues of the Buddha. One of these is the Buddha with his hands in the teaching position that's in the museum at Sarnath. The other is this reclining Buddha that is at the sacred site in Kushinagar. This might end up not being a short teaching after all, the way I'm digressing today. And then we also went to the stupa nearby. So that's that there. We made some prayers there. We went to the stupa at Kushinagar, and where the stupa that was built where the Bhagavan Buddha was cremated. And Rinpoche also recited prayers there. And when Rinpoche is on pilgrimage and he's reciting prayers, it's like that intensity of doing it, because he knows this point. It is exactly the same. So when you get to a place and you see, you might have an opportunity sometime to go to an exhibition of relics of the Buddha, they come by, they're not quite as common in North America as they are in Asia. Or if you go to India or Nepal, go on pilgrimage, go to some of these sacred sites. Some of them don't look like much. But if you go there and you know, oh, there are, if you look like you go to Sarnath, you see the Dhammik Stupa. And you know that there are relics inside. Knowing that there are relics inside, you pray knowing that you're praying to the Buddha. Illusory or not, doesn't matter because of your intention, the power of your intention, creating merit that is illusory, fine, doesn't matter. You follow the illusion of going through the path and eventually you reach Buddhahood. And so this is a really, really important point in terms of our practice. So now the next point, we've come to the topic on proving that seeing emptiness is the path. The reason this topic comes up is because people say, as it says here, one can be freed by seeing the truth. Why bother seeing emptiness? You can reach arhatship by just realizing the Four Noble Truths. Why do you need to bother going through this complicated emptiness stuff? It's so hard to understand. It's so contrary to the way we think of things. If you just meditate on the Four Noble Truths, they're simple, they're easy. The Buddha taught them. We know the Buddha taught them. So why bother seeing emptiness that's in these, these scriptures that appeared later and all this? So this, first we have the proof of this logically, or proof of it scripturally, because there's no awakening without this path the scriptures teach. So Shantideva's reply here to this first reply is that if you do not have an understanding of emptiness, then there's no way that you can really even realize the selflessness of an individual. Now, at first, this seems like kind of different. Like if you're practicing the path of the foundation vehicle, you meditate on the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths, and in particular, you start with the truth of suffering, that it is impermanent, suffering, empty, and selfless. Now, the emptiness here is emptiness of anything that you can grasp at as me and mine. You meditate upon this in the Four Noble Truths. Then when you actually see it, you have the path of seeing, you become a stream enter, then your meditation gets better, you become a once returner, then you are freed from the desire realm, you become a non-returner, then you're freed from all three realms of existence, and you're an arhat. So why bother meditating on emptiness? And the reason for meditating on emptiness is that in order to realize the emptiness of a self, which is what you meditate on through practicing these meditations on the Four Noble Truths as taught in the foundation vehicle, in order to realize that emptiness of a self, you have to realize emptiness. And this is said in many different scriptures, particularly in the Mahayana scriptures, of course. It's clearly stated in the scriptures on transcendent Prajna Paramita Sutras. The 18,000-line sutra is often quoted here. So the reason for this, and Mipham Rinpoche talked about this, actually, when you think about selflessness of the individual, actually, it is exactly the same as emptiness. The only difference is that you're thinking about it only in terms of your own individual self. You are looking at your form, your feeling, sensation, formation, and consciousness, and seeing that nowhere in there is there any self. It is empty of a self. This is seeing emptiness. You're looking at it in a limited area, but you are realizing emptiness. It's exactly the same realization. If you realize that there's no real me looking at those, it's exactly the same as looking at a cloth napkin and realizing that there is no real cloth napkin here. The only difference is what you're looking at. So in order to have that realization of emptiness, you're having the realization of selflessness, you're having the realization of emptiness. The point is that when you realize emptiness, even though the emptiness of all phenomena is the same, because of our obscurations, we don't realize it all at once. It's often said that the emptiness of one phenomena is the emptiness of all phenomena. And yet, because of our obscurations, we have to go through like a little at a time until we can actually get it, right? So first you think about the emptiness of a self, the selflessness of the individual, or emptiness of personal self, and that is the path of the foundation vehicle. It's exactly the same, just you're looking at it with a different basis for analysis. As you get further and further, as you go down the path of a bodhisattva, then you have greater and greater, you realize greater and greater levels of emptiness by realizing that more and more things are, more and more entities of this world are empty. But it's actually inherently the same emptiness. So that's, I've generally been speaking according to Palo Tsula Trengwa's commentary, but I'm bringing in a few other points. So that point comes from Jumipam Rinpoche's commentary, the Sheto Ketaka, the commentary on the 9th chapter, which is actually a wonderful commentary. But I'm not going to digress any further, otherwise I will never be able to get to Williamstown this afternoon. Okay, so we go on. So this brings the point, well, it's said in the scriptures that you have to see emptiness to realize the Four Noble Truths. So what, but those are the Mahayana scriptures. We don't accept them. We only accept the foundation vehicles. And so Shantideva then says, if the great vehicle is not proven, how is it that your scriptures are? So he's asking the foundation vehicle people, how do you prove that your scriptures are the words of the Buddha? Because they're proven to us both, is the reply. Both the foundation vehicle and the Mahayana vehicle accept that the foundation vehicle scriptures are scriptures. So therefore, because we both accept them, they're valid. The Mahayana scriptures are in dispute, so they're not. Shantideva's reply is it's actually kind of a hard one to respond to. At first, they were not proven to you. Well, if they were proven to you and proven to us, were they always proven to you? No. When you were a little baby, did you know that the Buddha, did you believe that that the foundation vehicle scriptures were the words of the Buddha? No, you wouldn't believe anything about them. You didn't know about them at all. You had to meet a spiritual friend. The spiritual friend had to teach you the scriptures, show you how they're true, give you experiences, then you believe them. Yes, this is true. And then you believed in them. Well, the reasons for believing them are the same for the great vehicle true. You happen to go into a foundation vehicle, meet a foundation vehicle teacher. If you meet a Mahayana teacher who teaches you the scriptures, and you see them, you practice them, you see how they're true, it's the same. The reasons for believing them are the same for the great vehicle too. Well, then the other aspect is, well, if you're saying that being proven to two parties, and being objected or not, proof of being or not being scriptures. So if you say that they are the scriptures just because two parties accept them, you say that one is not because one party objects to them, then that doesn't work either. If they're true since two parties accept them, that is, the foundation vehicles are true because both the Mahayana and the foundation vehicle accept them, then the Vedas and such would also be true because the Vedas, there are different explanations of this in the commentary. Some say that there are passages in the Vedas that are accepted as scripture by some Buddhists. They're also accepted by the non-Buddhists. Another way you could look at it is that the Vedas are accepted by the Mimamsakas and the Sankhya's both. So there must be Sankhya's, the Vaisheshika. They both accept the Vedas, so the Vedas must therefore be true. Right? But that's not necessarily, that doesn't mean that the Vedas are the words of the Buddha. If it's because the great vehicle is in dispute, so if you're saying that the great vehicle teachings are not scripture because they're disputed, then you have to reject your own scriptures because they're contested by non-Buddhists, as are some you and others challenge. So the non-Buddhists, of course, say that the Buddha's words, they say that none of the Buddha's words are really scriptures. It's the Vedas that are scriptures, not the Buddha's words. And also, not only that, even within the foundation vehicle, there were many different foundation vehicle schools. There are 18 schools, and they all had their own collections of sutras. They all had their own collection of the Vinaya, and they had debates, and they'd say, ours is right, yours is wrong. So they're all in dispute. The next point is that if you don't realize emptiness, you cannot reach ultimate bhikshuhood. So you have to realize emptiness. So you need these teachings. The teachings root is bhikshuhood, but bhikshuhood is difficult. For those whose minds still have a focus, reaching nirvana is difficult. So Shantideva's next argument is that if you do not realize emptiness, then you can't really become a bhikshu. Now, you might say, but don't you just have to take vows to take a bhikshu, to become a bhikshu, like, like someone like me? All I've done is taking vows. I certainly haven't realized emptiness. But I have taken vows, and everyone calls me a bhikshu. So what do you mean? There are different types of bhikshus. There are some people who just take bhikshus because they want to be able to go and beg and get food, especially in, Asian cultures or in ancient India or whenever. When you have a culture where people support the Sangha, people would do that. And some people do it for various reasons. Some people have the motivation of wanting to achieve bhikshuhood. But the ultimate bhikshuhood is the bhikshu. What the bhikshu really is someone who has abandoned the afflictions. And the only one who's truly abandoned the afflictions is Buddha. And without realizing emptiness, even partially, you can't even begin to truly abandon the afflictions. And without realizing it fully and becoming a Buddha, you can't completely overcome it. Because if your mind still has a focus, if you have not given up the dualistic ideas of perceiver and perceived, then reaching nirvana is difficult. The other point Shantideva says is that the arhats who have not realized emptiness fully, they've realized it partially, who have not realized it fully, are not completely freed, actually, because they're not freed of karma. As one is freed by just discarding afflictions, it's immediate. If you were to be freed by just discarding the afflictions, as the arhats have done, remember there are afflictions and then there are cognitive obscurations. The afflictions prevent you from achieving liberation, achieving the state of an arhat, but that's not true freedom because you're still affected by karma. You have to overcome the cognitive obscurations to become a bodhisattva and then a Buddha. And so, it's if it were merely achieving afflictions were enough, then you'd immediately be freed of karma. Yet it is seen that karma has power over those who do not have afflictions. The classic example of this, but there are many other examples. The classic example of this, though, is Maudgalyana, the one of the great pair of the Buddha's disciples, and he was the one who was greatest in terms of miraculous powers. And yet, because of his karma, when the non-Buddhists came to beat him up, he couldn't get away no matter how hard he tried. His karma obscured his miraculous powers, and he was beaten to a pulp. If at that time it's definite that they do not have the cause craving, then why don't they have, just like delusion, the unafflicted craving too? So arhats at that point, they may be subject to karma, but they do not experience it as suffering because they don't have the cause of suffering, and they don't have the cause of rebirth, craving. So it's certain that they're going to pass into nirvana without remainder. Even if they're going to be affected by karma in this lifetime, they're not going to be affected in the future because they don't have the cause of that craving. So, and Shantideva's point is that they may not have afflicted craving, but they do have unafflicted craving. They have the wish to eat. They want to go out on their alms. They get hungry and things like that. And so they have unafflicted craving. Craving is due to the condition of feeling, and they do have feeling. So when you have feelings like pleasure, pain, and so forth, then that promotes craving. So here, Shantideva is distinguishing between two levels of craving. The foundation vehicle doesn't make this distinction, but in the Mahayana, Shantideva does. Just as we talk about there being causal, afflicted and unafflicted delusion, there is also afflicted and unafflicted craving. So I won't go too much into that for right now. A mind that has a focus dwells on one thing or another, as with conception-free absorption, a mind that lacks in emptiness might cease but will arise again. So meditate on emptiness. So you may achieve arhatship and think that you've achieved the ultimate liberation, but it's actually just kind of like a way station, according to the Mahayana teachings. Traditionally it said it's like a jewel eye. It was like you're traveling on a ship. You're going off to some far off land, and part way, and actually not even all that far along the way, you get to this nice little isle, and the captain, being very skillful, says, "We're just going to this first isle. It's beautiful there. You'll enjoy it. It's like Bali. It's like you're going to Bali." And you end up in this isle and it's beautiful. And then the captain says, "Actually, we're not there yet. The Jewel Island, uh, our real destination is further along. We have to keep going." And then you go. Similarly, the Arhats, they achieve Arhatship. They achieve a state of peace, the peace of nirvana. But their minds still have a subtle focus on cessation and so forth. They have a subtle focus. And because they have that focus, their mind, that they may be in the absorption of cessation, but the mind will arise again. And at that point, they will need to continue on the Bodhisattva path, which means they'll need to meditate on emptiness. So why wait? Meditate on emptiness now. Why put it off? Right? Now we're back to the discussion of the sutras. Actually, in some passages, in some versions of the text, these next few verses are placed back before with the other verses talking about the scriptures. In some passages, in some versions of the texts, they question whether these are actually Shantideva's words or not. But we're going to take it as if they are, and we're just following the order as given in the text as found in the canon. If you accept the Buddhist teachings as the Buddhist teachings, the words included in the sutras, don't you accept that the great vehicle is mostly the same as your sutras? When you look at the sutras of the foundation vehicle, and you look at the teachings of the great vehicle, there's so much that is the same. Teaching about the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 feet of miracles, and all the rest of the 37 factors of enlightenment. They're in both sets. The teachings about what all the different mental factors are, they're the same teachings that you have to practice jhana, the teachings about the suffering of samsara, it's all the same. So it's mostly the same. So if you accept it in the one, why don't you accept it in the other? Well, then you say, the Mahayana teachings have some that aren't included in the foundation vehicle. Therefore, none of the Mahayana teachings. Some of the Mahayana teachings aren't found in ours, so therefore none of the Mahayana teachings can be teachings. And so Shantideva reverses the logic. He says, so if all of them are flawed because a single one is not included, so if all of the Mahayana is not the Buddhist scriptures because a single teaching is not included in the foundation vehicle, then the opposite logic should be true. And since one sutra is the same, why aren't they all the Buddha's words? There's one sutra that's the same, therefore they all must be the same. The logic is the same, right? So you can't. So your logic is, in other words, this is saying your logic is not for saying it's not the Buddha's words is not valid. The main point here is just because you don't understand something yourself doesn't mean that you can't say that it's not the Buddhist scriptures. Just because you don't understand the teachings of Mahakashyapa and so forth did not truly fathom, who says they're not to be accepted? So Mahakashyapa is said to have been present at the teaching of many, and Shariputra, Maudgalyan, and all the great arhats are said to be present at the teachings, are recorded as having been present at the teachings of the Prajna Paramita Sutras and other Mahayana Sutras. They did not understand them because of the level of, we talk about Mahayana, they're not in the Mahayana family. They didn't have the capacity to understand it. So if they didn't understand it, how can you expect to understand it? That doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't the Buddha's teachings, just because you didn't understand. I don't understand, therefore it's not the Buddha's teachings. You could say that about a lot of it. It's a dangerous road to go down. And so this actually comes to really the main point of this whole passage on proving the scriptures. The real point here is that when you're talking about scriptures, we've got Tibetan Buddhist scriptures. We've got different schools in Tibetan Buddhist scriptures. We've got Theravada scriptures. We've got all the other ancient Indian scriptures, most of which have been lost, but a few of which have been preserved in Sanskrit or Pali or whatever, or in Chinese. We've got the Chinese Buddhist scriptures. We've got the Japanese Buddhist scriptures. So you were to say, our scriptures are the only ones that are right, and all of the others are not the words of the Buddha. You can't say that. You have no way of knowing, really. Furthermore, what this is actually, it is what we call the karma of rejecting the Dharma. This is actually like the worst thing you can possibly do. It's one of the worst actions. There's a sutra that says it's even worse than killing all of the, it's quoted in Chakme's Karma Chapme Sukhavati prayer. To reject the words of the Dharma, of the words of a Bodhisattva, is even worse karma than killing all the beings in all the realms. Why is that? Because you're discouraging people from practicing the Dharma, which means that they're going to encounter untold suffering. And you yourself, because of rejecting the Dharma, are also going to encounter horrible suffering for many lifetimes. You're preventing people from achieving enlightenment. So it's really important for us to have like a really non-sectarian attitude of being accepting to all of the different levels of scriptures. Like we see this in the present day. You have a lot of disputes when some Dharma centers about this set of teachings, that set of teachings. In Tibet, historically, there have been huge sectarian fights. This is actually terrible karma. It's really important for us to uphold the teachings of all of the teachings of the Buddha. The Gyalwang Karmapa frequently speaks about it. It's a very important thing. We have to have a pure view. We may disagree, for example, in our Karma Kagyu view, to take it from the perspective of Tibetan Buddhism, we may disagree with the views of, say, the Gelugpa school, the Dalai Lama school. There are some important differences. The way I'm teaching emptiness, and the way I'm teaching the way of the Bodhisattva, a Gelugpa scholar hearing this would probably say, no, it's not that at all. And they would be right. That doesn't necessarily mean that the way I'm teaching it, well, I'm not going to say that it's right either. But there are different presentations. The Kagyu presentation and the Gelugpa presentation are different presentations. And the reason why you have different presentations is because you have different types of people listening to the teachings. Some people immediately feel faith. Some people, when they hear like the way I explain it, they get worried about what about relative world and the karmic cause and effect. If then they hear the Gelugpa teachings, which are very subtle, very good, but they have a very clear presentation of relative and karmic cause and effect, and people feel a lot of comfort and faith in that. That helps those people. Some people, it's the other way around. It's like they're more comfortable with the Karma Kagyu teachings. And so in the same way, in the Chinese tradition, there's all the mind-only teaching. When we say the mind only is, lesser teaching, blah, 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 it's really hard to actually argue that. It's all Dharma. It's all going to benefit people. Not only Buddhism. We've got to think about this, like here we are in North America, so Christianity. It's done an incredible amount of good for a lot of people. And there are a lot of people, I think, really, to be honest, some of the best practitioners, the people who seem to be like the most affected, the most moistened by their practice are Catholics. Catholics get a bad rap these days, but there are some people who really have faith in Catholicism, and you can tell it's really benefited them. So how can we? The Catholic Dharma is good. Protestant Dharma is good. We'd say that also, there are a lot of Muslims who really got a lot of benefit out of their Dharma. So who are we to say that it's good or bad? This is real, this is wrong. It's all worthy of upholding. We need to have a pure view of all of it. And yet, at the same time as that, if we then go out and kind of discard our own particular teachings, the Karma Kagyu teachings, and in particular the teachings as we received them from Khenpo David Rinpoche, then we'd be so busy helping everyone else, that this particular set of this real jewel that we have that's beneficial for a lot of people could be lost. So it's important for us to, first of all, we have to work to understand and realize and understand this jewel that we have, these teachings that we have, and do what we can to understand them. But at the same time, as we do that, we must absolutely avoid saying about other teachings, good or bad. If you don't know, you say you don't know. I'm not familiar with those teachings. Like, for example, with Islam, it's true. It's hard to actually find material that in English that really presents a good, fair. At least I've done some. I haven't looked hard enough, probably. It's hard to find some things in English that give good, fair presentations of Islamic theology. There's a lot on Christian theology. There's a fair amount of Buddhism. I've done some looking for Islamic teachings, but it's harder to find. But if you look at it, there's got to be something there, because you can see it's something that's brought a lot of benefit to people. But we can't, say, okay, we need to try to uphold all of that. We can't. We can't say it's bad. Just say, I don't really know. And rejoice in the benefit that people get out of it, because people do get benefit out of it. So it's really important for us to have this wide attitude of being accepting for all Dharma, and but at the same time, remembering that what our practice is and what we need to uphold is the Karma Kagyu, in particular the Karma Kagyu as taught in Trungpa monasteries, as preserved by Trungpa Rinpoche. Of course, since all the whole tradition of explanation of our Karma Kagyu lineage all comes through Trungpa Rinpoche. The teachings that we're giving today. If it weren't for Trungpa Rinpoche, this wouldn't have been then passed down to the four heart sons, and they wouldn't have been spread to all the Shedras. So the fact that we have Karma Kagyu teachings on Buddhist philosophy is all because of Trungpa Rinpoche. Well, the 16th Karmapa too, but really it's Rinpoche that it came through. And so this is really important for us to preserve and to learn and to uphold. Upholding by mastering ourselves through our listening, contemplating, and meditation, and then by studying, and then by teaching and practice. This is what we need to do with these teachings. And if we don't do that, if we don't preserve that, there's a lot of interest in it here. When I go walk, I didn't do so much this visit, but I took a couple of walks out, and of course I'm wearing a big, big sign. Hey, look, he's a Buddhist. Everyone can tell. And so every time I go out, people sort of look and they stop and they talk to me. And yesterday there was someone, he was not free this morning, unfortunately. He couldn't come by this morning. I said, come by the center. And hopefully he'll come by on some Monday night. I gave him the address, and hopefully he'll come by. There's a lot of interest here for people in Portland. And this is really important for us to preserve it and to try to bring it to as many people, bring as many people into the center and preserve Rinpoche's activity. Okay, oh boy, I'm not doing a quick teaching at all, am I? So let's go back, and we've got a couple more verses to go through. So once you've accepted that you meditate on emptiness, why do we meditate on emptiness? Freed from the extremes of greed and fear, to stay in samsara for the sake of those who suffer due to delusion is the result of emptiness. As bodhisattvas, we want to be able to help all sentient beings. And if you have an understanding of emptiness, then it's easier to you understand that it's all illusion here, and then it's easier to actually commit yourself to staying in samsara. We do need to stay in samsara. There are so many sentient beings who need our help. As Rinpoche says, you can't do everything in one lifetime. There's a lot of activity to be performed, and we aren't even at the point where we're performing activity, as the way we say, when you're talking about a great being. We're just doing what we can to do some good and gather the accumulations and remove our obscurations. But to be willing to stay there without any extreme of really wanting to be in the God realms or being afraid of being in the hells, that's a result of meditating on emptiness. So therefore, you shouldn't have any doubt about meditating it. The refutations of the position of emptiness are not reasonable. So do not harbor any doubts and meditate on emptiness. You shouldn't have any doubts. You should just meditate on emptiness. You should feel ready to practice the meditations. It's important to do this. There's no reason to doubt it. It is a teaching of the Buddha, so no reason to doubt emptiness. And the reason why there's no that it's logical to meditate on it is that the remedy for the darkness of the cognitive and afflictive veils is emptiness. Wouldn't they who want omniscience quickly cultivate it? If fearfulness is born out of the things that produce suffering, then why is it that emptiness, the cure for suffering, provokes dread? So emptiness is the remedy. When you meditate on and realize emptiness, then by doing so, then you free yourself from suffering and become able to help others free themselves from it. So if you truly want to follow the example of the Buddha and all of the great masters of the past, all the great beings of the past, if you want to follow the example of Chenrezig and Tara, if you want to follow the example of, Guru Rinpoche and Yeshe Tsogyal, if you want to be able to follow any of their examples and achieve Buddhahood, then you have to meditate. Why wouldn't you meditate on emptiness? But we're afraid of emptiness because we don't understand what it is and because it's really contrary to our particular cravings and attachments. So you're afraid of it. But really what you should be afraid of are the things that produce suffering. That's what you should be afraid of. You should be afraid of your attachments. You should be afraid of your jealousies. You should be afraid of your angers, but we're not. We like those. Emptiness, you say, and people run away. But still, it's like, oh, we're going to go out for a nice lunch today. It's like, oh yeah, what do I get? Emptiness, maybe next time. That shouldn't be like that. It's like the emptiness should be what you're really excited about. So that, I believe, is enough for today in terms of the teaching part of today's program. What do we have? It's 20 past 11. I'm sorry, I've spoken too long. Let's have time for maybe one or two questions, if anyone has any questions. Does anyone live have a question? Anyone? Okay.
Yeah, back to Saturday morning. We were talking at the beginning of the presentation on the illusionary product here, and it had to do with karma. I had a question all worked out in my mind, and then over the course of the week I've forgotten it. But it had to do with karma. If the being is illusionary,
Oh, okay.
the mind is illusionary, then the karma is still being perpetuated. And then that thread went through the whole rest of that teaching.
Yeah.
But I have confusion on that beginning part of it.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you could expand on that a little bit, clarify it.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat the question and simplify it a little bit. There's the passage that that we spoke about last Saturday morning, where when you're talking about the objections that if beings are illusory, then karma makes no sense. How can killing an illusory being create bad karma? And Shantideva's response is that if you're killing an illusory being who has an illusory mind, then it is bad karma. If you're killing an illusory being that does not have an illusory mind, then it is not bad karma. In other words, to give the analogy, if you are killing your illusory least favorite politician, right? The least favorite politician has a mind. So that is assassination. It is bad. It is non-virtue. Now, if you are playing a video game and you kill a character in the video game, the character in the video game looks like a human. It's an illusory being, and you kill it, but it is not the karma of killing. It is not going to be it's not a cause of full ripening, shall we say. It's not going to ripen as a result in the future. Killing an illusory being will, so if they have an illusory mind. So that's the distinction. So what he's saying is that we sentient beings may not be real. We may be illusions, but we also have the illusion of having a mind, which just a garden variety illusion made by a video game developer or made by an illusionist in ancient India doesn't have that. So because we have the illusion of a mind, we experience the illusion of suffering, but we don't realize it's the illusion of suffering. And generally, when you're killing, the person who's doing the killing is illusory and has an illusory mind, but doesn't think of themselves as being illusory, doesn't realize their own mind, and doesn't realize the action is illusory, nor do they even realize that it's unnecessary to kill people. It's totally unnecessary to kill people or any sentient being because they're going to die anyways. So why bother? You're doing something that's going to happen to them anyways. You're wasting your time. They're going to die anyways. And anyways, so, but it's because the motivation, you have the conditions there that will create a karmic result. They've all come together. That karmic, now, in the middle way, this is all illusory, but you don't realize it's illusory and you experience it as if it were real. With the illusory being in the video game, you kill that illusory being, but that illusory being has no illusory mind and doesn't die. Or even if you're in a video game, you're playing what do they call them? Multiplayer role-playing games, where you have a bunch of people who go and they shoot at each other's characters in these shoot-'em-ups, right? I've read about them. I've never played them. I have no interest in playing them. But people do this, and they go and they kill each other in this. So you kill someone else's, character in the role-playing game. You shoot them and you splatter blood all over the place in your video game, and that character dies. Is it bad karma? It's not. I mean, it's not good karma. It's actually kind of negative because of the way you're playing the game. But it's not karma that's going to cause a ripening. Because that character in the video game doesn't really have a mind. The player behind it who has the mind didn't actually die, right? So what you killed doesn't have a mind. It isn't bad karma. Does that make sense? Okay. Have we got any other questions? Looks like no other questions. That means it's a wonderful opportunity for us to recite some Tara mantras. What we'll do is I will lead you in it, and we'll do 100 of the. Hang on. I've got 2 malas, so I want to use the one that Rinpoche gave me. We're doing it for Rinpoche's good life, long life. I'm going to use the mala Rinpoche gave me. Okay. So this is a picture taken 12 years ago, soon after Rinpoche. Actually, no, it's probably a year or so after Rinpoche had moved into his new quarters in Namo Buddha. So we'll recite the White Tar. We'll just do a very simple version. We'll recite this first, and today we'll do it in English. Then we'll recite 100 of the shorter mantra, which I'll show to you. And then we'll recite 100 of the longer mantra, and then a short dedication. And then we will recite the long life prayers for the Karmapa and Rinpoche. We will begin by reciting the words of, I should have put this in, I'm sorry. The words of going for refuge in bodhicitta. So, Have you all got it memorized in Tibetan, or should we do it in English? Okay, we'll do it in Tibetan. O sanje chedan tsogi chonam lam chanchu pardo dani chapsum chi dagi jinso gibe sunam ji Drola Penjir Sanje Drobar Sho Sanje Chedan Tsogi Chonam La Chancho Parado Dani Chapsum Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sunam Ji Drola Penjir Sanje Drobar Sho Sanje Chedan Tsogi Chonam La Chancho Baradun Dani Chapsum Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sunam Ji Drola Penjir Sanje Droba Sho. The gods and demigods bowed down their crowns before your lotus feet. I prostrate to the Mother Tara, who liberates from all privation. Om Tare Tutare Ture Swaha, Om Tare Tutare Swaha, Om Tare Tutare Swaha, Om Tare Tutare Swaha. Om Tare Tutare Swaha, Om Tare Tutare. Om Dare 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 So, Om Dare 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 Mama Arupuni Jana Pushtin Kuru Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Ture Mama Arupuni Jana Pushtin Kuru Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Ture Mama Arupuni Jana Pushtin Kuru Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Ture Mama Arupuni Jana Pushtin Kuru Svaha. Om Tare Tutare Ture Mama. Om Dare 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 Mama Are Pune Jana Pushtin Guru Swaha. By this virtue, may I swiftly realize venerable noble Tara and bring every sentient being without exception to that state. Jakun Yinje Rasu Karma Bhajakun Chidme Chid Karma Jakun Dun So Wongur Karma Wujin Rodu Chine Shabtezu Om Swasti Chini Tombe Ngani Le Juju Hamu Zemetsu Shasum Chaye Shive Gu Namden Tambe Jesu Chon Chida Dule Gyache Chim Mitun Se Parche Sel Chime Tse Hatso Gi Pade Lame Kutse Sing Tadu Shiva Chigi Go Junmi Cheba Long Zo Na Tso Chu Be Zu Chu Ni Chu She Me Ngo Ram Den De Tse Wan Ram Je Lam Me Go Yum Drum Bao Du Ram Den Jing Ri So Min Be Che Char Yi Du Je Shing San Min Brar Zi Lama Cho So Ye Dam La Dur Je Che Son Dam Den So Yelwa Ke Ji Me Baro Me Be Den Om Swasti, O peaceful Kaya with 3 faces and 8 arms appearing from the empty nature of Dharamata as a beautiful. Please protect us. May the deities of deathless life who triumph over the Lord of death and dispel the obstacles to life extend the glorious Guru's life to the always peaceful Dharma Kaya, the constant flow of Sambhoga Kaya, and various emanated marvels. May the Guru's body, firm and stable, with burgeoning life force, live long within the field of vision of us disciples as a glorious symbol of constancy, and ripen the good field of disciples with the rain of Dharma that matures the 3 families. Guru's 3 jewels, Yidam deities, and protectors of Vajra Dharma who have Samaya. Do not neglect this even a moment. Fulfill our prayers. O peaceful Kaya with 3 faces and 8 arms, appearing from the empty nature of Dharmata, as a beautiful illusory goddess, O best of guides, please protect us. May the deities of deathless life who triumph over the Lord of death and dispel the obstacles to life send the glorious Guru's life. Through the always peaceful Dharmakaya, the constant flow of Sambhogakaya, and various emanated marvels, may the Guru's body, firm and stable, with burgeoning force, live long within the field of vision of us disciples, as a glorious symbol of constancy, and within the good field of disciples with the reign of Dharma that matures the 3 families. Guru's 3 jewels, Yidam deities, and protectors of Vajra Dharma who have Samaya. Do not neglect this, even a moment. Fulfill our prayers. Tembe pajor karma lodre shache pa sambut yunden kachav de peshi shabe taten shedro jitin chole namja palbar Tembe pajur karma dresha chirpa sambo yundem kacha de pejin shabe taten shedro jitune chole namya palbar Tembe pajur karma dresha chirpa sambu yunden kacha de peshi shabe taten shidro jitune chole namja bhabar Chöyen ta me pe chil kordu kacha kai dorje nimbu so shom shi me ba ni de ga ba po ju ja me bra Within the edgeless, centerless mandala of Dharma expanse, your life is space's Vajra essence, permeating space. We ask that you please stay indestructible within, the locket of the sun and moon, unchanging, never leaving. Lama kukang sangwar solwad, chotu kutse ringwar solwad, chinne darshin gela solwad, lama dan chalwa mepara jinji lo, palden lame shape demba da kanyam yonla, Degi Jungwa Dan Daje Malu Sosa Tuchane Nuradu Sanje Sala Gubar So at this point, I would like to take the opportunity to thank everyone who has participated online and in person, or a little bit of both, for coming to these teachings this year. And hopefully we can continue and actually finish this sometime. We'll do it, hopefully. We'll see how it works. At any rate, I'm very grateful for all of you. In particular, there are people who have helped out with the organizing, and some of them are here and some of them are not in person, some are online. This is just how it goes. So maybe I would like to offer a virtual kata to all of you, and maybe actual offer. This is a virtual kata to all of you who are now online. So there you go, the virtual kata. And then an actual kata. Most of the contact I've had has been through Steve Gilbert, who has done this. And of course, everyone did a lot of work. So I'd like to also offer a kata to Steve for all his efforts in putting together. And Steve, as a representative, is all the members of the organizing committee. So thank you very much to you for hosting me this last week. Thank you. Okay. And so I think that's, rather than go on forever with thank yous, it's best just to express my gratitude for all of you, especially given the extenuating circumstances of my health in the last week. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very, very much for your presence, both virtual and real. I'm so glad you were able to join us today. I think that was a treat. So we look forward to hearing from you, and please be well. And thank you for coming.
Thank you. For those, did you online hear that? Do I have to repeat that? You heard it. Excellent.
Did they hear?
They heard.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right.
Thank you.
And so this is on behalf of all the people who are online. And also for all the people, I know that there's a number of people who've contacted me that were not able to be either in present or online, and will be watching these teachers on video. So, we look forward to catching up.
Okay.
And hope to see you next time. So this is for all the people who are watching online.
Oh, so thank you for everyone
Thank you
online. Okay. Well, let's not do too much. Let's do the important thing. Let's dedicate the merit. Let's not waste our times on formalities. Thank you. We're all grateful to each other, I know. So let's just accept that as a fact, and we're going to recite the dedication prayers, do what's important, really. So please dedicate the virtue of our engaging or trying to engage in teaching and listening to the Dharma for the past 8-9 days to the benefit of all sentient beings, in particular, so that all of the gurus, the Gyalwang Karmapa, Khenpo David Rinpoche, and all other gurus of all lineages and all dharmas, so that may all live long and spread the activity of the Buddha and bring all sentient beings to Buddhahood in whatever realm they may be in, whatever infinite world realm they may be in. To that end, let's dedicate this so that we ourselves may become worthy students, worthy servants who are actually able to benefit them, as opposed to just being abject, miserable people who need their help. We need to become someone who can actually help this, the gurus. And so let's make this dedication so that we ourselves become able to help the gurus. Make this dedication so that all sentient beings may swiftly achieve the state of perfect Buddhahood. And until that time, that they may be reborn as humans in a place where they can come in contact with the Dharma, that they may do so, meet a spiritual friend, and be able to swiftly traverse the path to Buddhahood. And until that happens, may they never have any pain or suffering or illness or other misfortune in their lives. And in particular, we need to dedicate it for all the people who support us, the people who support the center, the people who support me, so that they may also, and all the other people who work on the behalf of the Dharma, let's dedicate this merit so that they all may fulfill their wishes in this lifetime and swiftly achieve the result of Buddhahood. And in this way, thinking in this way, let's just dedicate this so that all sentient beings swiftly achieve the lasting happiness of Buddhahood. Where did it go? Wrong one, sorry. That's the one we want. Okay. Emaho ngotsar sanje nawa taye da yeso jo tuje chenpo dam yunde senpa tuje tom nama sanje chansen pame korji gol deje ngotsar Pandu me bayi dewa chen she jawe shin kamder dane dine tsepe jurmata gewa shingi parama che paru deru chene nante shatong sho deke dagi menanta padi Choju sanje chansen tamje gi genme drubar jinji lamdo Tadya ta panjendriya Our Buddha Naya Svajodu Jaya Seje Gon Sonye Zola Jiram Dagi Dusum Gesaba Kunjo Sumla Chubabu Jalwe Tamba Pejurji Gewa Sanjan Kunlang Ho Drogun Sanje Tobjurji Getsa Tamji Jitude Dagi Jula Minjurji Jitne Tane Tsozote Tsere me nyamdo pe tsendire saju nanjurji namshi tsepe jurma thar dewa jendu ke jurji kene beme kache te luten dewa sanjisho Chanju tomne jisi do to bedo den balo sunam de tam jisi pani tomne nye bedranam pam chene Gegana chi bala chu simbe tso le ro kunyo ro. So thank you all very much. Thank you very much. Actually, at this moment, I'd like to, there are a few of our Dharma friends from Vancouver listening in. So I had hoped to be able to see all of you this week, but because of Rinpoche's illness, I might have to go to Nepal. It's not certain. I'm going to spend a few days at my sister's house, reciting some mantras for Rinpoche and resting for a few days, and then depending upon how I'm feeling and the instructions from the Karmapa, I may well be going back to Nepal. So I will be delayed probably in seeing you again. So I'm disappointed not to see you because it's been quite a few months, and I do miss seeing everyone in Vancouver, having spent so much time and made good Dharma friends there. So I will be in contact with you and let you know. And of course, you've probably all heard from Dungse Lama Pema's letter yesterday. He's in the same position. So we will look forward to seeing all of you when we can get back to Vancouver. So thank you very much. Let's see, I'm going to turn off my microphone and just
Thank you, Kambula.